It's
It's
a
a lot.
tough.
You're trying to balance a lot of things.
Okay, I think we're back now.
All right, thank you, Molly. So the policy committee meeting of May the 30th is back out of executive session. Do we have any executive session action from any of?
No, ma'am.
Okay, wonderful. Moving along to our general session items. The first item is the approval of the April 25th, I think that's supposed to say 23.
It is. I'm sorry, it in board docs incorrectly, but it is 23.
Okay, so correction on that, April 25th, 2023 committee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Dallas, seconded by Mrs. Boatright. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving those minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, so that's unanimous. Next item is item B, review board policies for supplemental materials. And I believe there are some attachments that are in board docs presently that links directly to the ARs for those supplemental materials. And just for new board members, in case you didn't know, Mr. Dallas, on these regulations, at the very, very bottom of all of these ARs should be a reference to what are their guiding, references, essentially.
Oh,
So,
okay.
you've
Good.
got the legal references for federal, state, or local, if there is any, but then board policies as well. So if there's any board policies that are guiding different regulations, they should be referenced at the bottom.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And so let me pull up mine here because it's a little bit bigger on my screen. I had gone through and looked at what was in board docs in regard to, let's see, IS 38, 35E1, and 35. I'm going to open up the floor to other members to see if they have any comments before we dive into anything else.
I have IS 35 up. Do you want me to put something up differently?
If any of the other board members want to, you might
Okay.
want to have the other ones just at the
They're
ready.
ready. I mean, I have them ready, but I just showing that one to begin with.
Well, I feel like a bit of a dummy. So I thought this was about the executive session documents. So what this is to add laws to the ARs or
So
policy?
this is to, so with the conversation of our book reviews and things like that, and I think Ms. Boatright, you and I have kind of talked about this very superficially, is that our board policies are not explicit in the role of us and our what we would like to see happen with supplemental materials, which would be, I believe, including library materials, media materials, instructional resources that are added, but not necessarily coming down from a list at the state level. So we used, I think, the language of supplemental just to kind of be all encompassing. When I looked at our GCs and OEs, it did look like, there isn't a clear, it is somewhat of a gray area.
Well,
And from by policy and by the way that we are supposed to work operationally is that there really should not be an AR without an attached board policy. The ARs are supposed to guide from the board policies in most instances.
I'm sorry, man.
No, go ahead.
Can we pull up the area that currently guides our methodologies?
Yes, so I think, so there's quite a number of them. The one that I found in our board policy manual, oh goodness, I think I went.
It's OE 12,
It's
17.
OE 12, you're right. And there's certain numbers in there that somewhat do cover these ARs. But it uses maybe different terminology than what the ARs use, because the ARs even reference recreational reading or recreational materials, and we don't specifically use that language in our policies. So OE 12 items, let me see, look here.
Make it bigger or?
No, it's fine. You can strain my eyes a little more.
It's 12-12, right? Regulate of right materials and textbooks.
What,
maintain-
I think
was
it's
that, Ms.
11 and 12 are the two main ones I think that I had looked at that I thought, okay, that really covers, or is, I think, intended to cover everything, but might not be as explicit as it should be.
And it's your opinion that these school boards are in charge of library materials and other software, other supplemental materials.
Yes.
What constitutes a supplemental material?
Well, and that's what would be more so encompassed by definition in the ARs. We don't necessarily have it defined, and I think that's what the issue is. So if there's definitions, and I think it's in 38, Robin, IS 38, I think is the one that has the definitions in it.
Okay,
Yeah, it's got instructional material, instructional program, and recreational reading are defined here. And then I think even below, there's a couple other maybe terms that are used that aren't clearly defined, but I might be.
Madam Chair?
Yes, please go ahead.
So what we are considering is to actually define the word supplemental into the types of materials.
Either to define supplemental or to just bring our board policies in alignment with the AR so that we're very clear and explicit that the operational expectations of the superintendent are the guiding post in our policy for him, for his ARs, and for the district. So where it says, let's see, let's look here in our OE 12. There's one in here that talks about, yeah, like number 14 talks about instructional programs and textbooks and engaging stakeholders. And I believe there's another one, number 7, or is it? That one talks about encourage new and innovative programs, carefully monitoring, evaluating effectiveness of the programs at least annually. And I believe there's another one that talks about reviewing instructional materials maybe annually. So I just want to be sure that we are
number
covered.
11.
There you go. Yep.
And I have not reviewed this particular section.
Okay.
If we're going to have a meeting that we're going to, excuse me, if we're going to review the public comments, can we also review this at that time? And that will give me an opportunity to be a little bit better informed. And it's my fault, not no one else's, that I'm
No,
not.
that's totally fine. We can table it until, the next meeting. And if you want to dive into this, and then I would also suggest then if we were going to do that, that pull from, because it's not just OE 12 that is used to guide the ARs that were included in board docs. I wrote them down, and there's GC 1, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. So look at the bottom of those ARs that are included in board docs and those cross references to the GCs, OEs. I think there's even some board superintendent relationship ones. I would just suggest doing that to make sure that you're familiar, because even I'm sitting here and I helped write these and I can't even remember them by number. So
No
that would
problem.
be a suggestion. I'd be fine with tabling it if you'd like to.
Can
Ms.
I
Bo-
ask a question before we table it?
Uh-huh.
I was not aware that the ARs had to be tied to a district policy. Because my understanding of coherent governance is that we are essentially telling him he can do what he wants to do to achieve the results, which is another conversation, that the board desires, as long as he stays within these, they call them the values. Like you can do whatever you want to achieve student achievement, but you have to do X, Y, and Z, and you may not do X, Y, and Z, ABC. I
Yeah,
don't, I didn't realize it was,
Sorry, I was just gonna say they can't be in, like direct conflict or anything. So
Well, I-
and if there's silence, then there's almost an expectation that there is a policy that it's deviating from, or a federal regulation or a state regulation. So there might be, we kind of all encompass those when we say, I don't even know where it is in our handbook or somewhere. It's in one of our policies that we say, basically, the superintendent is expected to abide by all federal, state, local regulations. So there may be not a very specific board policy because we all encompass those there. But we, outside of that, it is derived from somewhere because that's how we gauge operations too.
Yeah,
Oop, go ahead.
okay.
Sorry, I thought my computer froze.
I would benefit from, a little bit, not a little bit more, but some rigorous study on my part of this area. I feel like I could contribute maybe more effectively. If
Okay.
that's-
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And if there's anything else in the interim that we need to pull up or add into board docs that anybody can think of, let me know.
Mhm.
These were just my suggested ones to kind of add in, and I asked Robin to help a little bit as well, so, which I appreciate. Thank you, Robin.
You're welcome. Okay.
Anything else? So then, do you want to make a motion to table it until the next meeting?
Yes, ma'am, I will make a motion. We table, this section until the next, policy committee meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion, objections? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Ms. Cartledge, did you have a comment?
Just wanted to let you all know that instructional services is going to be working with us because many of these administrative regulations need to be updated. And this one, the instructional resources material, you see, it says October 2017. It needs to be updated. The PPRA, we have that notice up on our website. But those need to be updated, and we're waiting to see if that can't remember that HR is at 2357. Anyway, that Transparency and Integrity Act, we that might be getting passed, and we'll be doing a lot of work on these administrative regulations. So they're in the process of they're going to be reviewed over the summer. Dr. Stratus and her team will all work together.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear too that I believe, and someone correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe the main intention of this conversation is to make sure that we're saying there is a board policy that says the superintendent is charged with what is here and listed
Right.
in that has to do with supplemental materials.
Right. And then, under 59-1990, general powers and duties of school trustees, you all are governed by statutes as well as your coherent governance. So we need to make sure that we carry out the will of the board and running this
That might be-
district. We want to make sure we do that. Mhm.
And you know what, Ren, you just sparked something in my brain, Wendy. I believe there is a statute as well that is a state statute that we might want to have incorporated into board docs for this next conversation that is talking about the board's role in instructional and library materials and things like that. So I don't know the statute number offhand. I can try to pull it up, but I know
Okay.
it's passed.
Yeah. In addition to the general duties and powers, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
There are some, I've been looking at some state legislation. There's some laws that have been passed. How do we make sure we're current in compliance with those? Is it through the policy? Is that what you're referring to, Madam Chair?
Yeah, so we don't have a standard operating procedure for how we're making sure we're in compliance with changes in statute. I would think that would be a good conversation for us to have to see if that should maybe be a standing policy review that occurs or a legislative committee thing that occurs. But from my understanding, I don't think we have any standard procedure for that.
We
At least-
have to, whenever there's a new law, we bring it. So for example,
Right, Wendy
this is
takes
an
care of that.
example, the lactation law, there was a new statute Governor McMaster passed. There's also federal law. So we had a new administrative regulation, a lactation support for our breastfeeding mothers. So that we're doing that in our schools. We made sure that in planning Robert Smalls, that we have 2 lactation. I mean, we're required to come up, to be aware of the new laws or bring it to you. For example, with the Narcan, I was talking with the nurses, we're going to have a new administrative regulation about the administration of Narcan in schools. I mean, we have
I
a
was
lot
gonna
of
say,
work
they
to
do
do
that
after.
already.
I think,
So-
Mr. Dallas, were you referring more to like board role and responsibilities, not necessarily things that are delegated out to the districts?
Correct.
Right, yeah, because there's a number of board responsibilities and things that get, just added each session that we are supposed to be the overarching entity looking at those items. So but we don't have an operating procedure for that. The district clearly does. Ms. Cartledge is on top of that.
And it may be as easy as just having, a very simple addition that says the board will review or have a report from the superintendent as to compliance with recently passed legislation. So we don't get caught sort of,
Mhm.
in arrears.
I'll put that on future topics.
Mhm.
Yep, okay, so then this one is being tabled. Next
Okay.
item on the agenda here,
Let me move it.
closing all my tabs.
Hold on, I'm with you. I'm closing tabs.
The next item is discussion on when motions can be made, and I believe this was a result of some different board conversations, but I'm going to let Miss Boatwright kind of take the wheel on this one because I think this is kind of her baby.
Well, it's not my baby. There was some confusion and there was some discussion, and I thought it might be good if we were going to make rules about motions. Because the issue that came up was that policy committee couldn't make its motions because 2 of the motions weren't included on the agenda. And so there was a decision that said it's an all or nothing, which I think is a fair thing to do, but that's never been in our policies. And I actually prefer that. As then it came up to, was it results? Results committee. My report was right after policy. And I had not checked to see if the motion was on there because that had never been required to be on there before. So then there was some questions to whether or not I would be able to make a motion, and it just got to be kind of out there. My thing is, what was said was that everything should be on there. And I did some checking into Robert's rules. And one thing that I saw was that, yes, especially for something where you're going to publish the agenda in advance and there's FOIA and Open Meeting Act requirements, the motion should be on there. And that really the only way to make a motion spontaneously inside the board would be to ask if there was exigent circumstances. Like, yes, you can make a motion if there's a timeliness. Otherwise, it waits till the next board meeting, which I like a lot because we have made several motions in my 2+ years on the board where I don't think people were prepared. I think it was a big topic that suddenly was, and what was said was, well, go ahead and make a motion. And all of a sudden, I mean, that's how we got into the mask thing, was that at a board meeting, someone randomly made a motion that, to require masks, right? And so then and I just feel like I would prefer to have the motions on there with the caveat that if there is something that comes up in a discussion that is timely before the next meeting, that at the board chair's discretion, with the ability of the board to, question the ruling of the chair, that motions can only be made under those circumstances. But we have nothing in policy.
Yeah, the only thing I know that we have in policy is specifically, I believe, in reference to committees. And it's GC5 where it says under number 1, sentence 2, committees customarily will prepare recommendations for board consideration. And I think that's one of the things that had happened at a recent meeting was there were going to be recommendations coming out of policy, but maybe they didn't make it onto the actual agenda. They were in my report,
Right.
but they were not explicitly written on the
On the
agenda.
agenda.
So
Well, and what I would say is there's a little bit of a difference between a recommendation and a motion, right? I mean, there's policy, you can make a recommendation without making a motion, I would think, as part of a report.
customarily, I think what we've been doing is that when we come out of committee, the recommendation is made in the form of a motion and seconded so that it can be opened up for discussion.
Right.
That's what we had done in the past.
Mhm.
I think you're right, where sometimes the recommendations are on the actual agenda and then sometimes they're not. So I think for
But that's-
efficiency purposes and for board members to be prepared for, they might see something on an agenda and go, oh, that's coming out of policy. I should go watch the video from policy so I'm prepared for the conversation. I do think there's very much some validity to that. Mr. Dallas?
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think Ms. Boatright mentioned a few moments earlier to actually make sure that there's time to research and review those things and come in prepared. And I also agree with you, Dr. Wisniewski, about the, a recommendation versus a motion and what have you. So I think adding a little bit more discipline to that, not saying anyone is actually intentionally, me, I just don't know. So it will certainly help me hopefully become an effective board member.
Okay.
I was going to ask, so do we think that if we clarified the language in that existing GC5 subpart 1 second sentence?
I have a comment too. My
Okay,
hand-
okay. I'm going to complete my sentence. If we added to that sentence that committees customarily will prepare recommendations in the form of a motion for board consideration, does that clarify it, or is that not explicit enough in that it would then be the assumed operating procedure that it would then be placed on an agenda in that format? I would
Yeah.
defer to Robin for.
I think the majority of the time, because coming out of committee, this is a recommended motion. So the language coming out of almost every committee, or we try to do, it's recommended to the full board. So it is a motion that's coming. When the agenda comes out to you all on Fridays, so part of it not being on the agenda, I'm going to take responsibility that when committees are meeting, because I forget of what actual motion goes on. My assumption was when we make the committee reports, because we say there's action items coming out of committee, I was not clarified that I only put motions on there when you specifically requested that we need to put this motion on there. But my understanding was that anything coming out of committee is an action item that we could put it on the agenda. I mean, it didn't have to be listed on the agenda. It would be a report. But yes, I can make all the motions that once you make a motion in committee, when we say recommended motion, your recommendation is the motion. We can place that on the agenda. So yes, that every motion is on the agenda coming out of committee. I just ask for you all's help that as you review the agenda over the weekend or before it's published on Monday, if you see that something is left off from your committee, that is the time that we can make sure that it's on there prior to it being published on Monday.
Yes, I agree. Iron sharpens iron, Ms. Cushing.
And I would have checked my meeting. That had not been something.
It had been like 24 hours or something.
Right. And I only put your meeting on there knowing that it was scheduled for that Monday. So I knew that there was going to be a results committee meeting, but not necessarily that I just thought you would be giving a report that there wouldn't be any action because there was not time on the agenda for anyone to see any action. If there was any action items, yes, it has been understood if there's action items that people needed the weekend to see the action items, except for anything coming out of executive session. So something under the superintendent's report, something out of committee where there was no action taken, I put it on the agenda knowing that there wasn't an action item going to be, that it wouldn't be an issue. So that's where that confusion came about.
Thank you, Robin. Mr. Smith?
In terms of what Mrs. Cushionberry said some of it, but also in terms of, once again, I think this is comes down to leadership, to the leadership of the board, because it's interesting that this has came up now in the time that when I first got on the board. I remember Mr. Dowling used to always say that that certain motions could not come up unless there was a emergency or a circumstance. I remember him. He would say that, and then the board kind of the board got away from that, and kind of seemed to been operating a little differently. So I just think that in terms of what you're saying, I just want us to my things. I just want to make sure that we do understand that if we do move this way, that motions, it will be very hard for motions to be brought up unless there is an emergency to bring up a motion moving forward. So I mean, I just want to make sure that's the route that we're heading in. That we make sure that everyone do understand exactly what that means.
I'm just going to make a comment on that. My recollection was Mr. Dowling's issue stemmed from things that people were bringing up that was not on the agenda. And in order to have a discussion about something that's not on the agenda, it has to be an emergency and accident circumstance. You have to have a certain level of vote support for that. I don't know if it's 2/3 or majority. But that's what I recall his main issue being with motions. Ms. Boatright?
Thank you. It would be reasonable to clarify when a motion can be brought in front of the board, though, in line with the Open Meetings Act, because the principle of having the motions on the agenda in advance is so that people can be prepared for them. And I do think that we have gotten into a situation where someone makes a report and there's a discussion, all of a sudden we're making a motion. And I've tried to, send those to committee, refer to committee, or table them. But I do think if there should be a process that if someone has something that they would like the board to consider that comes out of a discussion on the agenda, there should be a process to make sure that that is put on the next meeting agenda. But I would appreciate, as a board member, I'm prepared for my meetings. I know where I'm going to stand. I'm open-minded, but I know what I'm looking for out of the discussion. And when we get these motions, sometimes on fairly significant topics, and I am frantically trying to find out, the policy, to me, it's not good governance. So I would prefer to have some clarification on when a motion can be made.
Okay.
Beyond just out of committee, but that's just my personal take on it.
I have a question.
Yes,
For
ma'am.
me,
So for either one of you, so in what you're saying, for an example, under board business, and we have a bond approval of a bond. And when they send the documents, what you're suggesting is if you're under board business, if you're going to approve that I'm using Franny Heiser because there's usually a long resolution, blah, 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 blah. You want all of that on the agenda prior to, so that you know that that's the recommended motion. Is that what you're asking?
I wouldn't think you'd have to put the whole motion, but I think you could put something on the agenda motion in, you don't have to type the whole thing up to the agenda, but something that there is a recommended motion that can be found on the document in question. There is one other thing that, if you don't mind me bringing up, this is another topic for further discussion, but one of our things with the superintendent is that, let's see, what was it? It's one of our OEs on communicating with the board, which is a reasonable place to put this, that says, let's see, and this came up in the discussion about committees. Present information in simple and concise form, indicating clearly whether the information is incidental, intended for decision preparation, or for formal monitoring. And I thought that was, I thought that was a really interesting part. Sorry, I mean, keep cutting you off.
No. That's I'm really glad you pointed that out, because that could be that could be the solution too. we are getting when we're going over those different board business action, that there is a designation of what the intention is. And those three are typically what we use when the district is giving us, it's either informational, it's a formal monitoring report, or they want us to make an action. They want action out of that. They may or may not have a recommendation of what they're looking for. But I think that would be, so I have, just based on our conversation, those two suggestions of GC 5.1 having a minor tweak to it so that it fixes the issue with committee reports and having motions made out of committee. And then also perhaps I don't know if it requires actually a recommendation coming out of policy committee. It could just be that it is in my report out of policy that I indicate and bring attention to what you just referenced in that OE. What was it? OE
Which
OE
OE?
10.6.
10,
10.6.
10.6.
And the other part of that to consider, and this is for
Simple
another,
Right there.
is that really the committees are to do the formal monitoring. And I think that we've got some incidental stuff going on in committee that may or may not make it into the report or to the full board. And we have some things going on in committee that is intended for decision preparation. I don't know if those things should come. In other words, that's another conversation, what the role of the committee is in coherent governance. But I feel like in some ways, the committees are taking on a bigger role, which I'm a big fan of committees. But on the other hand, the stuff that's supposed to come to the full board needs to come to the full board. And the example was that they apparently made some sort of recommendation about a full board issue, which is, attendance zoning of a school. It was not intended for decision preparation or formal monitoring. So it should have come to the full board. I don't know why it was in committee and they're like, we'll bring it back up. This was just to kind of give you guys a heads up. Well, committee is not where you give the full board a heads up, in my opinion.
Yeah, that might be.
That was the new apartment that was in operations when they talk about the apartments and where those students were going to go to school.
Let's put that under a future agenda topic, because that one I feel can be pretty lengthy.
I just kind of-
What's the topic?
Discussion of board committee roles. And that would be specifically GC 5 is where we'd find that information. Yes, sir.
For whatever it's worth, I know, I've seen organizations that use, as a heading, FYI, FYA, which is for your action, or you could just add a third one, monitoring. So when they're reading it from the top, they automatically can ascertain what they need to be able to do when they come into the meeting.
Yeah.
I like that.
Mr. Smith?
I'm just gonna make a comment. I believe that when they did bring that monitoring piece on, that they did let us know that it was in operations committee meeting, that it was just to let us know an FYI, that they were pretty clear to let us know that, hey, there's a house complex going up. I thought they were pretty clear of what they were talking about, and I thought they let us know that they were just letting us know, and they didn't want us to let the full board know, and they were going to mention it to the full board. But I believe that we did before.
Okay, we'll cover that at a future meeting. So then any action off of this item, if you are in concurrence, I will pass the gavel and just make a motion to make that small change for a recommendation to the full board, just to get that ball rolling on first reading.
What action? I'm
gonna pass the gavel.
okay. Is this for motions to be made or under committee reports? I'm trying to catch up.
This is going to be, I'm going to make a recommendation out of policy to the full board to add, quote, or change essentially the second sentence in GC 5.1.
Oh, let me go back to, okay. Okay.
So that sentence, the recommendation will be for that sentence to read, committees customarily will prepare recommendations in the form of a motion for board consideration. End quote.
Okay, so that's the, I don't know if I'm holding the gavel. It was all very metaphorical. I'll
Yes,
second.
Okay.
Oh,
So is there any discussion on that recommended, that will be a recommended motion coming out of committee to make this be the,
Okay, slow down for a minute. Motion to recommend to the full board that policy GC
5.1.
5.1,
So the second sentence only is the only change.
right? Have to see, the board committee did a board committees,
Committees customarily,
oh, that sentence. Committees customarily will prepare a recommendation in a form of a motion for board consideration.
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So my only discussion on that, Robin, while you're, is that I think we also need to say that those must be listed on the agenda.
Okay, so in the form of a motion. And listed on a future.
Yeah.
Agenda. Tell me if you need me to say it again, Robin.
Okay, motion. Wait a minute. Committees customer will prepare recommendations in the form of a motion for future agendas, or
Mhm.
future what? Future agenda? Board
For-
agenda?
Board agenda. And consideration. You don't have to say board twice.
Board agenda and consideration.
So the intent, just to verbally say it on the record, the intent of that is that we are putting what has been our practice, and also what is the desired outcome of having the recommended motions that come out of committees be listed on our formal agendas, so that board members have time to prepare for those and go back and look at anything they need to. Is there any other discussion before we take the vote? Mr. Smith, I see your hand up. Did you have something to add for this before we take the vote? Okay, I don't think so. So I'll call the vote. All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. And Robin, if you can make sure that that is on the agenda.
Yes.
So
And-
I think, sorry for interrupting, but I didn't want to Christmas tree that motion. But I do think that it would be good at a future topic to talk about how motions are brought up, because I have heard several times in the course of meetings where someone will discuss and they say, okay, well then make a motion. And
Right.
then we end up, a lot of times we table. I think there should at least be a discussion at a future policy committee meeting or some sort of language in there about how we will handle, because again, the intent of what we just did was to make sure that people could prepare.
Mhm.
And
I-
I don't like kind of being sideswiped by a motion that I'm not ready for.
Gotcha. So outside of board business items that would be, that we're going to try to ask the district or the superintendent to list, what the intent of
Right.
the are. Outside of that and outside of committees, you mean all the other motions? that
Any
occur?
spontaneous motion that is not on an FYA, I like FYI and FYA, anything, spontaneous motion, absent exigent circumstances will be put on a future agenda.
And the staff usually, when they give you, in their executive summary report, there's
Mhm.
usually a motion at the bottom of each of those documents when they are presenting something showing what their recommended motion is. And some of them say like option 1, option 2, but the staff is under board business. There's usually the staff does give you a motion to let you know. So if you're reading your documents, over the weekend, in their executive summary, there is a recommended motion
Right.
at the bottom of them.
Are you talking about board members though, Ms. Boatright?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm talking.
I'm guilty of that. And I certainly, and that's because but I typically do come prepared with the motion and my rationale under an agenda item. So I don't know if that's outside of Robert's rules or not. That I know that's how we've typically done. If during discussion, someone wanted to turn or that seemed like the board's will was going to go in a different direction, or they wanted to try to push.
Amend what is recommended, you would come with another prepared motion if you're not going with the proposed motion.
Well, this is I know we're hour and 40 minutes, but I think this is an interesting discussion to the extent that, like, if you have an item and you want to bring it forward and you're prepared, I want to be prepared, so I'd like to know what the motion's going to be in advance so that I can kind of think about it, get some opinion. So I think it'd be worth discussing how we bring motions. I think it's not a big problem, but I have had it happen to me several times where I felt like, wait, what are we talking about? And I wasn't together, and it was sort of a scramble, and I don't feel that the board really made necessarily the most informed decision it could.
Gotcha. Well, let's add that for another
Yep.
future topic. And now that this one, so just so that I make sure that I'm doing my role out of policy committee, I will make this recommendation to the full board for first reading. And then in regard to other items, like you mentioned, Ms. Boatright, I think it was under OE 10.6.
Yeah.
Where the board business or the intent of what the district is looking for, whether it be for informational purposes only or for action. I'll discuss that and point that out, and maybe ask Dr. Rodriguez to formulate a procedure for that, pointing to that policy. So for this item, I think we're good, unless anybody has anything else. Okay.
I have one
Yep.
question. I read through some board docs, I can't remember where or what, but it talked about that there had been some training on Robert's rules as they are applied by the school district. Is that anybody familiar with that?
I still have the documents of Helen McFadden did training on parliamentary procedures or rules. We've had two. I think Helen McFadden is the last person who did parliamentary procedures training that we had for the board. So I have her documents, and we can also have that again, if you all are interested in that.
If it's okay with this group, if Ms. Cushenberry, if you could send me whatever documentation's already been presented, I'll study those, and then if the rest of the group wants to have, schedule that, then I certainly will go along, but I'll try to not encumber the rest of the group.
Are you making a motion, Carlton?
No, ma'am. Just a request, send me the information.
So I have for future topics, board roles, operating procedures, discussion of board committee roles, which is GC5, how to handle motions, and 10.6, what does that reference to?
That's
That
what
was
I'm gonna have in my report.
Oh, that's in your report, so that's not future topic.
It's just me kind of pointing out what Ms. Boatright pointed out, which would I
Gotcha.
think lead to some better operations on the agenda.
Okay.
Ms. Cartledge?
Yes, thank you, board members. I just want to share this information with you. I'm going to give it to Robin, but I have a book about Robert's Rules of Order too, and it talks in here, which I didn't know this, but some motions require majority vote and others require 2/3 vote.
Mhm.
And I just want to share that not only for the benefit of the new board members, but for all of us, because I think it is kind of a tricky subject matter, and we need to be careful how we do this. So.
Okay,
Okay,
can you share that when we, at the next
Yes.
meeting?
Yes.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Thank you, ma'am.
Attorney, can you show the cover of the book? Because I had a book on Robert's Rules and I loaned it to someone, and I can't remember who I loaned
Well,
it to.
y'all are gonna laugh at me because I'm such a reader, but I have the traditional Robert's Rules.
Oh, no, God, no.
I have this one. I also have Robert's Rules of Order Simplified and Amplified.
That's the one I had.
And then
Yeah.
my dear husband gave me Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised and brief, and last for you. Robert's
there it
Rules
is,
for
Robert's Rules for
Dummies.
Dummies.
Robert's Rules
That's a
Hey,
good
that's for
one.
me. That
That's
one's
a
for me.
good one.
The second book that you showed was the one that I actually had, and I don't know who has it. I loaned it to someone 2-3 years ago. I can't remember, so.
I don't know, I feel like you're accusing Miss Cartledge.
No, absolutely not.
But that's the one that's got the votes required for various motions, which I thought was pretty interesting. I would like it in a plainer view, you know, so.
I got halfway through it.
Okay.
Alright.
Oh, did you freeze? No?
No.
I keep thinking you freeze, Mr. Dallas, if you just stop moving.
Yeah,
Okay, so did we have, no, Robin, I think we're on D. That was discussion of committee reports on the board's agenda, like the deadline for when.
All right.
So do you feel like? Oh goodness, someone's mad.
Well, there's activity outside.
And some
And
food.
I'm getting moved around my house here.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Did we
so
cover that?
I think it was that there is either a past practices that any committee meetings outside of 24 hours before a meeting do not make it on the agenda, but that's not in our policy. And I think it would be good to add that if that's what we want to do. Just it helps you plan if you're, trying to pick a date and you want to get something on. And this hasn't happened to me, but if you're trying to get something on a meeting and you have the meeting, but then it's a business day, I think there should just be a guideline.
Okay. So then that would be probably covered under GC5 as well.
Yeah. Yeah, or it could be under, well, no, I was gonna say it could be under, I don't have my computer with me, but where we list out the agenda.
Mhm.
We could say, committee reports up to 24 hours, any committee meetings held with it up to 24 hours. I think it's good to plan. The
well,
other
that
thing
would
is
make
that-
it,
So we'll take yours for an example. So technology meets on a Monday and the board meeting's on Tuesday. We won't list technology on that agenda since it's a meeting on that Monday prior to the board meeting.
right. But I do
Gotcha.
want that to be in policy to the extent that if someone else's meeting has it and then it gets listed, I
Right.
think it should be a hard-
Consistent.
and I think that makes it easier on the administration to prepare for the board meeting the next day and not be something that's crammed in.
I'm trying to look at our policy under governing commitments, GC2. I don't see anything explicit that says, committee reports need to be on it. So do we have a recommended change? Or is this just something that we'd like to report out and say, we would
I
like.
I'll make a motion. I'll say that I think, and here's my thought, Rachel, and you're good at adding stuff in. We could add it to 10, where it says the order. It could be in there, like D10, committee reports since the up from the last meeting up to 24 hours in advance of this meeting. Or does that get too cluttered? Where would you like to put it? But yes, I would like to make a motion that we insert in policy that committee reports will be all committee meetings since the last board meeting up to 24 hours. Because the agenda has to be published 24 hours, right?
Right. So
Yeah.
therefore, so if we
Until
take
the
your
agenda
ex-
must,
if we take your example, so say technology meets at 1:00, our agenda gets pushed on that Monday and the agenda goes out on that Monday. So we would not be listing technology on that agenda.
Right.
But it's coming out 24 hours before the board meeting.
Right.
Technology is, so my question is, do we put technology on there now? Because it's still within 24 hours.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 24 hours is a little tight. Just
Right.
if you look at 11B, where it says the board officers meet to set the agenda 8 days before, and then it says that Robin's role, the board's executive assistant shall provide the draft agenda to board members and BCSD senior staff no later than 5 days prior to the board meeting. To see if, I assume that's to make sure that there's no changes or anything like that.
Right.
I would think that it could go in 11B, to basically say, I would say 5 days prior
Yeah,
to the
I agree with that.
would be
I'm
the
fine
end,
with
the drop date, basically, so that Robin then knows, okay, I've got everything prior to, and that's all going to be on there, and that's kind of standard practice. And then anything that happens in that 5-day window will have to be pushed until the next meeting.
I
Yeah.
strongly support that.
Okay.
Me too. I
So
need,
th-
but it,
that same practice will need to go to towards staff and in terms of bringing and putting things in the board docs at the last minute or a couple of days before or the day of the meeting. Then that same practice
We
will
do
need
that
to.
anymore.
Yeah,
Huh?
that's already in policy.
That's already in policy and staff doesn't do that except for executive session.
Yeah, that's already a policy. We're talking about only specific to committee reports.
But my
Right.
question is, so, because I'm visual. So we have a board meeting on the, so our next board meeting is on the 13th, June 13th.
Yes,
If
ma'am.
we had, and we have a committee meeting, we have operations on the 12th. So the operations would not go on the 13th committee meeting.
Correct.
But anything that we have prior to Friday, so we set the agenda on May 5th. Anything the week of if we had committee meetings the 5th through the 9th, that would go on the agenda for the 13th.
Well, are we talking business days or are we talking just days? I guess, what is
It
your,
would have to be business days because we don't meet on the weekend. So if we had committee meetings anytime during next week of graduation, would those go on the June 13th board meeting?
I would say that if you're going to do a 5-day rule, it is assumed that agenda setting is on, you said the 5th, which
Agenda
is,
settings on the 5th.
and then 5 days, business days would be the 7th would be your drop day to get your draft agenda to senior staff and to board members.
So if we had a finance committee, which finance normally meets finance meets the second Thursday of each month. So, and we put there and usually that Thursday information goes out that Thursday night or Friday morning for the following board meeting. So we're saying, so if you put this rule in place, you're saying then finance cannot have their documents in for that next meeting, which becomes a problem for Tanya.
I kind of feel like that basically what we could say is that Thursday night, which is already in our policy, the agenda closes. And if your committee's not met by that point, when the agenda closes on Thursday, then you can't get added on. I mean, obviously, if there's an external, some sort of like emergency meeting of something. But
Right.
my thing is, I think that Thursday, when you put the draft agenda in and board docs is up, that's the cutoff point. Anything that happens after that is
Good. And that would be a more reasonable expectation so any meeting that if we had a committee meeting, say that Friday morning, that would have to wait until the next board meeting, not unless it was an emergency.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Okay,
So
so-
we have to word it that way to follow.
All right, Ingrid, you get the language.
okay. So where would we decide to insert 11B?
Yes,
Okay, so the policy committee recommends to the full board to add to GC 11, oh no, is it GC or OE? GC 11B, a
GC.
sentence.
GC 2 subpart 11B.
Thank you. Are you sure you don't want to do it, Rachel?
No,
Um,
my brain is fried. I can give you that. That's it.
Okay,
Motion to
perfect.
recommend to the full board to add to GC 11 sub 11B.
That any committee reports that are not available at the time of the draft agenda
Wait a
will be included.
Wait a minute, slow down. Available at the time of the draft agenda will be available.
So any committee, let me say this again. So any committee reports that are not available at the time of the draft agenda to board members, because I'm just copying that language, will be placed on the following board meeting.
Sorry if you can hear me typing.
On the following board meeting agenda. Does following work? It's not gonna be unclear, right?
Let me, motion to recommend to the full board to add to GC 11 sub 11B that any committee reports not available at the time of the draft agenda for board members will be placed on the following board meeting agenda.
Does following work there? That's clear to everybody?
That's
Yes.
what I'm trying to decide. I know your intent. I'm just trying to
Yeah,
decide.
yeah. I was trying to figure out a different word.
Will be
like the-
placed on the next board agenda.
Well, next and following, yeah,
I think that's sufficient, to be honest with you.
okay. Good. If Carlton says it's sufficient, then mic drop, let's go home. We're done.
You folks are very kind. It's the length of the meeting.
Mr. Smith's hands up.
Mr. Smith,
Actually, don't worry about it. No problem. We can go home.
okay, motion to recommend, and Robin, can you change that to 2.11B? Motion to recommend to the full board to add
Wait a minute, which one is 2 point?
So it's-
GC
2.11B.
2.11B.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's GC 11,
No, it's GC2.
GC 2.
Yeah.
GC-2.
Subsection 11,
Yes.
part 2, fourth sentence. It's like an
Okay,
elaborate Dewey Decimal System.
That any committee reports not available at the time of the draft agenda for board members will be placed on the following board meeting agenda.
Can I get a
No.
second?
I'm just gonna, you've got a second. I'm just gonna make a request that fellow committee members assist me in explaining this when I do bring it forward to the full board, because I have a feeling that the language might not be clear.
Well,
to
we might have an
Unless they
amendment.
had watched the meeting, unless they had watched our meeting, I don't know if it'll be completely clear, but I am fine with moving forward with it as is and hashing it out if we need to.
Sounds good.
2. Okay,
So any more discussion on that? It's GC2 sub. Hang on,
11B.
I just want to double check. GC. 2.11B. Yep, okay. Call for the vote.
Aye.
Mr. Dallas said aye. Awesome.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so that is unanimous. That'll be in my recommended motion out of committee to the full board. And that would be a first reading. Awesome sauce. Okay, moving on. Unless there's anything further. Future meeting dates.
Okay,
Um,
that's where we were having,
yeah.
so do we want to, can you meet during the day of next week?
I can.
I can. I can meet, Monday and Tuesday, depending on the time.
Monday's much better for me than Tuesday.
What time, Robin?
When, so is this for the executive session? Or we can continue with executive session?
hmm
So we would have to see if Mr. Williams is available, yes or no?
Yes, please see, or unless Ms. Cartledge thinks that she can kind of bring forward everything. Because I think what they were just doing was putting it into a draft.
Putting in a
essentially.
draft form.
Yeah, so if he's not available and Ms. Cartledge is okay with taking point, then I would suggest we go that route.
I'm very comfortable with Miss Cartledge.
with it.
Me too.
Thank you.
Are we?
Thank you.
You said Monday is better, or what about Wednesday, the 7th? Is that good?
I'm
No.
traveling that day.
Oh, you're traveling? Okay. So anytime on Monday,
Yes, I'm available anytime on Monday.
I'm free from 6. I'm free from 6 AM to 10:30.
Ooh, that's 6 AM.
so you're not free after 10:30?
It will be between 3:30 and 5 then.
We have agenda setting at 5:30 on, at May River. So if we want to meet at 10 o'clock on the 5th, well,
That's fine.
will that fit into your time frame, Mr. Dallas?
Yes, ma'am. Sure will.
Okay. So
So-
this will be remote, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is executive session only?
Yeah, we'll just do that one item and then we'll cover the other topics that we've put for future, on next month's or so.
All right. So Monday, the 5th, remotely, policy executive session at 10 o'clock AM.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All righty.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Dr. Wojcicki.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.